I reached out to Sarah for a roommate, faced crazy kitchen disasters, and ended up suspecting her brother stole my PS4. What a mess. This is my first time genuinely sharing such an extensive breakdown of the events that led to the loss of a very close friendship with one of my high school friends. For the purpose of this explanation, I will refer to her as Sarah. In 2018, my girlfriend and I ended our relationship. She moved out, and I needed to find someone to cover the other half of the rent for my 3-bedroom apartment, which was actually just the second floor of a renovated house. I noticed that my high school friend, Sarah, was posting online about how her landlord was causing her a lot of stress and that she was searching for a new place to live. I reached out to her, and she ended up moving in with me. Sarah and I had stayed in contact over the years through Facebook and occasionally ran into each other at parties or concerts, but we were not as close as we had been in school. We both thought that since we considered ourselves good friends back then, things would go smoothly. Initially, everything seemed fine. We experienced a few odd moments during the first couple of weeks, but overall, nothing too outrageous occurred. About a month later, after finishing a shift from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., I walked up to the house and noticed what appeared to be smoke coming from the kitchen window. I rushed inside and went upstairs, finding that Sarah had made stir-fry, plated it, and taken it to her room for dinner while leaving her bedroom door closed. This would have been acceptable if she had turned off the stove. Instead, she had left the frying pan, filled with oil and bits of food, on the burner, which was still on, for over 3 hours. It was nothing short of a miracle that the place didn't catch fire. I turned off the stove and moved the frying pan, which was so hot that I needed a cloth just to touch the handle, away from the heating element. I then checked on my roommate, only to find that she had gone to bed. I was furious, but exhaustion from work made me decide to address it in the morning. When I spoke to her, she mentioned that she had started cooking around 8 p.m., and I had returned home shortly before midnight. That meant the stove had been left unattended for 3.5 hours. By the way, if you're wondering why our smoke detector didn't sound, it was because she had removed the battery after it kept activating while she cooked, which she found annoying. This was not a one-time incident. She did this several times, not just with the frying pan but with various other pots as well. The third time it occurred, she had allowed hot dog water to boil for over an hour while she ate. When I eventually made my way to the kitchen, the water had evaporated due to the overpowering smell of hot dogs. The final straw was the dirty dishes. We shared dishes, pots, and pans technically mine, but I didn't mind if Sarah used them as long as she cleaned up after herself. After some time, I noticed that I had consistently lost 4 to 5 of my 8 plates, and often several bowls too. When I confronted her, she apologized and returned them. However, this issue kept recurring, almost cyclically. It reached a point where I would prepare a meal, only to find there were no plates available in the cupboard. It drove me crazy. I confronted her again and insisted she buy her own dishes and use them from that point on. She agreed and the next day purchased some. That seemed to resolve the issue, right? Wrong. It only escalated. A few weeks later, she informed me that she would be camping with friends for a week and a half and departed, closing her room door. I didn't think much of it since it was the middle of summer. Her room received the most sunlight during the day, so it grew quite warm in the hot July weather. 5 days into her camping trip, I began to notice a rather foul and rancid smell permeating the apartment. I first thought it might be some rotting fruit in the kitchen, but there was none. Following the odor, I found myself at her bedroom door. I sent her a text mentioning the smell coming from her room. She replied that she would take care of it when she returned. I foolishly decided to let her handle it, but as 2 more days passed, the entire apartment was engulfed in this horrible stench. I struggled to exit my bedroom, which I had managed to partially barricade with a towel to block the smell from coming in. I sent her another text explaining that the odor had intensified, and she gave me permission to enter her room to see what was wrong. As I walked in, I was immediately hit by an overwhelming wave of the foulest odor imaginable. Inside, I discovered that she had left dirty dishes piled up on her bed, dresser, and desk, essentially covering every flat surface in her room. There were not just dishes. There was uneaten food, including meat, vegetables, and half-drunk glasses of milk. I even found a bowl of congealed tomato soup with a thick layer of mold on it, along with maggots and flies. Yes, the source of the rancid smell was finally identified. I gingerly navigated the disaster of her bedroom floor, littered with soda cans, bottles, clothes, and other items, to collect her dirty dishes and transport them to the sink. In the end, I did her dishes for her, having to rush out of the kitchen repeatedly to catch my breath and stave off nausea. When she returned, I told her that we needed to discuss her responsibilities regarding her dishes. She became upset with me, claiming that I had too many rules. To be fair, I had to implement a no using LSD in my apartment rule a couple of months in because of a separate, awkward situation. A week later, she announced that she was going out with friends for the day and staying overnight, her usual excuse for using drugs, knowing I disapproved of her doing so around my pets. Having the apartment to myself for a few hours before I needed to leave for work, I decided to catch a bit more sleep. About 2 hours after I heard her leave, I woke up to noises coming from the kitchen. My bedroom wall, where my headboard was situated, faced the kitchen wall, so I could hear any activity. Initially, I thought she might have forgotten something and returned, so I called out to her. There was no response. I called again, but still received no answer, although I heard footsteps again. This confused me, so I got up and made my way to the door. I walked through the living room and halfway into the kitchen view when I saw her brother, who had helped her move in originally. I hadn't seen him since the move, so it felt odd to find him there while Sarah was absent. I greeted him, and he stared back at me with a startled expression. I asked where Sarah was, and he explained that she had sent him over with her key to grab something, holding up her keys. I accepted that explanation, although something still felt off, but I chose to ignore it and return to my room. I heard him walk through the living room to the hallway and enter her room, where he shuffled around for a moment before leaving and heading back through to the kitchen, exiting down the stairs. I let a few hours pass, occupied myself with video games on my Wii U. At that time, I was obsessed with The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and prepared lunch. By the time I headed to work, I had practically forgotten everything about my encounter with Adam. The rest of the day unfolded with various events, but by the end of my shift, I found myself hungry. I picked up some food on my way home. I preferred eating dinner while settled on the living room couch, watching a movie or a series on Netflix from my PlayStation 4. However, as I sat down and grabbed the remote, I noticed the television seemed to be misaligned. I stood up to straighten it out only to realize that my PlayStation 4 was missing. All the cables, controllers, the system, and some of my games were gone. Immediately, my suspicions fell on Adam, as he was the last person I had seen with a key to the apartment besides my 74-year-old landlord who lived downstairs. But when I messaged Sarah to ask what Adam had been retrieving, she reassured me that he was just grabbing her wallet. I confided in a close friend who suggested I contact the police, but I despise drama. The last thing I wanted was to cause conflict between Sarah and me if I turned out to be mistaken. Even though I was convinced of my suspicions, I couldn't bring myself to take that step. Instead, I made the decision to call around to local game stores, including several EB Games outlets in my city, the Canadian equivalent of GameStop, as well as a few retro gaming shops. I explained what had transpired and described Adam, asking them to call the police and message me if he showed up. Unfortunately, nothing came of my efforts, so I never obtained concrete proof, but in my heart, I know who was responsible, and I still feel angry about it today. After another week, I sat down with Sarah and expressed my belief that Adam had stolen my PlayStation 4, citing his access to the apartment, his shifty behavior, and the fact that my console went missing the same day he was there. She exploded in anger, shouting at me, "How dare you accuse my brother of stealing? He has never stolen a day in his life." She defended him vigorously and stormed off to her bedroom. The next day, I overheard her on the phone with her brother, relaying every detail while speaking loudly enough for me to hear, even with both of our bedroom doors shut. A few days later, she informed me that she was moving out because I set too many rules and found me disrespectful. As I reflected on all the incidents I had recounted and many more not mentioned, I thought, maybe this is for the best. She ultimately moved out within a couple of weeks. I have lost contact with her since then, having spoken to her only once, which is remarkable considering we were so close before this all occurred. I have sworn off having roommates in the future. Never again. Lesson learned. I apologize if this is a disorganized read. I attempted to present it chronologically, but it encompasses a lot of events over the span of 8 months.